All right, it is 7 o'clock, which means it's time for Toolbox Tuesday, our weekly webinar series that helps put tools in your toolbox to help you pound out problems and sharpen your saw. Today, we are going to be talking about why it's important to get club officers serving in your roles or in their roles, and why it's a benefit to the club officers themselves and a benefit to the clubs to pay attention to this important thing. Our presenter today is our District 106 Training Coordinator, Distinguished Toastmaster Joanna Carley. Apparently, if I take a week off, I forget how to open these webinars, so please bear with me. And Joanna is going to lead us through this discussion. I'm going to stop fumbling around and turn it over to Joanna. Joanna, please rescue us and take it away.
Thanks, Dave. This is why it's so important to have weekly Toastmasters meetings. Can't miss a single one. Yes, tonight's topic is club officer and what's in it for you. I'm going to share my screen. Dave, are you sure that I'm set up as oh, yep, sorry. I'm here. I'm there. So the reason that we're sharing this information in a Toolbox Tuesday, and the reason that we've chosen this time of year to share this information is because club officer elections are coming up in just about a month and a half. And when we start thinking about club officer elections, I think it goes two different ways. It's either people are excited, but they're not really sure what they want to do or how they want to participate in club officers, or you're looking for who you can volunteer to be the next club officer in your club. And we're here to change that. We're here to help you out, whether you're a current club officer or whether you're thinking about it, to enable you to know a little bit more about what the club officer roles do, but more importantly, why it's beneficial to be part of the club officer group and what you can get out of each one. And this isn't just important for those of you who are thinking about being a club officer next year. For those of you who are a club officer now, or you are thinking about someone in your club who would be a fantastic officer, but they just aren't sure yet. Hopefully what we talk about tonight enables you to have a conversation with them about why it might be beneficial to them. We think about these officer roles, and in some clubs, people say they're voluntold to be an officer. But I think that really removes a lot of what you really get out of being an officer in a club. Every officer role carries different benefits. It involves different skill sets, and it encourages you to try new things. I haven't been a treasurer. I think I've been all of the other club officer roles, and some of them have been fantastic fits for what I'm good at, and some of them have been a real challenge. And I think it's important for us when we're talking to people about being a club officer to really think about what is in it for them as potentially a new officer or a recurring officer in the club. So I framed it up as talking a little bit about what each role does, but more importantly, what each role gives us or what each role enables for us. For example, let me make sure that works. If you are your club's secretary, we know that that involves sometimes taking notes, whether it's for just the business or officer meetings, or it might be taking notes in every single club meeting. Either way, one of the things that is really important to being club secretary is attention to detail. I can tell you, as having been the club secretary, it is really tough. It's like being the timer and having to pay attention to time while you're also listening and engaged in the speech. Being secretary really involves a lot of attention to detail. And so if you were, for example, to talk about this at work or to talk about it in some other setting, you can use this experience as a way to communicate, yes, I needed to be able to pay attention to what was going on. I needed to make sure there was accurate information that was being portrayed, whether that's spelling people's names correctly or capturing the details of the business meeting, and ensuring that that information was captured and historically accurate. The other thing that the secretary often does, and I will advocate for this, depending on how your club is set up, is that they can sometimes be kind of the historian of the club. And that can come in very handy. For example, I had a member of one of my clubs whose car was broken into, and they happened to steal her bag full of Toastmasters manuals. But knowing that she had a record from the secretary of all the speeches she had done and when she had completed them, she was able to keep up with her Toastmasters work, and she didn't have to redo all of those manuals. It sounds like it's a silly little detail, but without somebody really paying attention in that secretary role, you wouldn't have that ability. For the vice president membership, you can gain a ton of experience in project management. What does this mean? Well, on your resume, you might say, oh, I have experience in project management. But what this really means is I helped people organize an open house, or I helped organize a speechathon. I helped make sure that our club met our membership goals over the entire year because I managed a project, or I delegated, or I helped other people. Another thing that the vice president membership can do is practice sales and influence. So if you're in sales now, or you want to grow a career in sales, or you just want to get better at maybe influencing and understanding how to work with different types of people, the vice president membership role can be really great for this, because you're not only helping persuade people to join your Toastmasters club, and I would say that's less of the sales and membership, but you are helping other people in your club understand how they can help other people join the club. So as the VP of membership, I will always say, you're not the only one responsible for membership in your club. We are all responsible for that. But as the VP of membership, you are responsible for helping other members of your club understand how they can help influence new members to join the club. And so the vice president membership can show what sales tactics work, can talk about how do we sell our club, how do we talk about our club to potential guests and members so that they can join the club. While I've not been the treasurer, I definitely understand the responsibilities of the treasurer and how important they are to the club. To me, this is one of the most important roles in the officer selection, because the treasurer is responsible for our finances, and that's a huge responsibility. I think this could go a long way if you were talking about your resume or talking in an interview, that a group of people trusted you to handle their finances and handle them responsibly and ensure that the books were always balanced. So the treasurer is responsible for collecting those dues, as well as paying those dues forward and managing any dues that the club collects to ensure that everything is funded appropriately and that they bring up any concerns about the budget. So the treasurer, I think you can talk about it from a responsibility perspective, as well as from a money management perspective. Whether you have a really basic budget for your club and you only submit a budget once a year, or you need to keep track and report back on that budget monthly, it's very important that your treasurer is able to handle the finances. The sergeant at arms, I think many times we can say that's not something that you would put on your resume, but I would argue that it's an extremely important job. You are the first impression officer. This is really relevant for anyone who's thinking about a human resources kind of role, anyone who is thinking about how do they communicate that they are reliable, that they can show up on time. That's what the sergeant at arms really needs to do. For a while in one of my clubs, The sergeant at arms was the person who picked up the key for the building. If you didn't get there, nobody was having a Toastmasters meeting. That's a huge responsibility. So the sergeant at arms is very much the person kind of behind the scenes that keeps things running, manages the logistics, ensures that we have what we need to get the meeting done and make it effective. And so it's really important that we talk about sergeant at arms as that first impression officer, that person who keeps everything running along the behind the scenes. VPPR, so the Vice President of Public Relations, also, I would argue, can do some project management. Typically, they're the one that the Vice President membership will work with and will run open houses or run other kinds of events for your club. The Vice President of Public Relations also can gain a ton of experience managing social media, whether that's Twitter, that's Facebook, whether it's a club website, it's the Toastmaster site. If you are somebody who's looking for experience in marketing or any kind of media production, the VPPR role is a fantastic add to your resume. This one is especially pertinent, I think, to those who are looking at internships or looking at gaining some experience in the marketing venues, because it directly relates to both the success of the club as well as what you might want to put on your resume. Now, VP Education. I put personal connections on here as the top, let's say, reward that you get. If you are truly engaged as a Vice President of Education, there are a couple things that really make you successful. And I think the most important one is connecting with each person in your club. And by that, I mean that you are talking to them about what's important to them, and that you are connecting them with a mentor as they start, and that you're paying attention to how they're going along in their program. And a side benefit or a side perk of that is that you would also then be very well organized, because you're going to make sure that everybody is progressing along in their pathways goals. So to me, personal connections is the biggest one that you can talk about here, where you are engaging with people, you're ensuring that they're meeting their goals, and if they're not meeting their goals, you're taking the time to encourage them to meet those goals. The other thing that I noted in here was that the Vice President of Education should have a way of ensuring that member progress is measured. Now, that can look really different for a lot of different people. Some clubs will have a huge poster board where they list off everybody's speeches, what number they're on or what path they're on. Other clubs might have each member track that individually, and still other clubs might have their VP of Education track it in an Excel grid or somewhere else. But wherever you do that, the VP Education has to be not just organized, but has to keep in touch with people and has to keep on top of progress so that they can encourage people along the way to achieve those pathways goals that they're getting to. And last but not least, the president. So as the president, it's a really interesting role because in a lot of ways, you are the face of the club. You generally speak at every meeting, regardless of, how your club's agenda is set up. You are responsible for setting goals and a vision for the Toastmasters year. And in addition, asking your officers to set goals for their Toastmasters year. As a president, you are responsible for delegating and matching talents to whatever has to happen in the club. If you know somebody is interested in a specific activity, you are the one who generally is able to match them up with that specific activity. So, for example, maybe your VP PR says, I really want to update our website, but I'm going to need some help on that. you can connect them with some member in the club and inspire that other member to help them out. Say that they're interested in social media and they're really interested in web design, that they can match that up. Not to say that other officers or other club members can't do that, but as president, that's somewhat your role as the leader. As president, it's also your role to ensure member success. And again, it doesn't mean that other officers aren't responsible for that. For example, the VP of Education should be tracking progress and helping people along. But as president, you carry a little bit of extra oomph in that conversation to just make sure that everyone is connected and make sure that they're still coming along and working on their pathways goals. One of the hugest benefits that I've seen multiple times as people have stepped into the president's role is that they gain confidence. And it's hard to quantify how they gain the confidence other than by dealing with issues as they come up. As a president, I've seen people who have been called to jump in because some of their officers don't step up to the plate. I've seen people who have needed to deal with drama or other personal or interpersonal issues within their club, and so they've gained confidence in dealing with those situations. I've seen people who just week after week, as they come up as the president to run the business meeting or to kick off the meeting, just gain confidence because they are continually there and building their own experience. One of the biggest benefits of being a president of a Toastmasters club is merely having the experience to go through and to learn and to try new things and to adapt as you go out throughout your year. It can be a huge role and it's a lot of work in some cases, but it's also one of the most rewarding roles within the club officer set. There are also some benefits or some kind of responsibilities that fall within multiple officer roles. So presidents, vice presidents education, and vice presidents membership are the conduit between the club and the district through area council meetings, as well as some other communication. Frequently, not just the president, but maybe those other two VPs will also be included on email communication from the district or other messaging that comes through from the area directors or division directors. So if you are in those roles, it's important to know that you are probably the conduit for your club to gain more information about what's going on. Typically, you want to choose people or you want to nominate people who understand that responsibility and are good about keeping communication connected between the club level and the district and division level. The secretary, the vice president of education, and the president are also administrators for base camp. So it's important for them to be people who understand how to use pathways or can learn to use pathways, as we are all very much still in the learning phase. And I also put in here that they're recognition administrators. Now, this isn't an official job title by any means, but part of what goes along with being a base camp administrator is ensuring that we are recognizing that our members are achieving their pathways levels. So if you are a base camp administrator, if you are a secretary, a vice president, education, or president, not only will you want to understand how to use base camp and how to approve those levels and submit them for awards, but you also want to make sure that you take it back to the club and recognize the people in your club for achieving those pathways goals. And all officer roles, this is a huge gain. I will tell you, for me personally, having Toastmasters officer roles on my resume has benefited me multiple times in being able to speak to some of these things that I have learned through both successes and failures that have been beneficial for me, and I can talk about how they've helped me not just at Toastmasters, but how they've helped me at work as well. Of course, we learn teamwork, right? We learn how to get along with people. We learn how to partner with people. We learn how to line up our skill sets with other people's skill sets so that we can come together and make something great. I learned about connecting with club members, and I see a lot of officers truly connecting in an officer role where they hadn't before. It gives you a little more sense of responsibility maybe to your club. And so I think that's part of what drives it. But all of the officer roles are both responsible for connecting with club members, and I would say it's a benefit because they start to understand what happens in your club and how we are connected to each other and how our success builds off of each other. All of our officer roles are building a skill set in terms of understanding agreement and how to gain agreement across a group. It doesn't mean that we have to have consensus on every single decision within our business meeting. It does mean that we learn how to interact and gain agreement within those 7 officers so that we can move forward for whatever is best for our Toastmasters club. And this is a really powerful lesson that obviously can apply to many, many places in our lives, right? Where we don't necessarily always agree on every single element of a decision, but we have gained agreement and can move forward with decisions. And then finally, accountability. And this comes in a lot of different ways for each person, but any of our officer roles helps us understand what our role is within the club. It helps us understand what our role is within our district, and it helps us learn how to hold ourselves and each other accountable. And this can be, how do we make sure that we line up work with the people that it's best matched to? But it can also be, how do I have a conversation with somebody because I'm not sure if they're doing their job, or how do I have the conversation when I'm not sure if I'm doing my job correctly? And so having those conversations and learning to navigate through that process is really helpful in the officer roles. I can tell you there have been many times where having the conversation between me and another officer helps me understand what they expected me to do versus what I thought I was supposed to do. And sometimes what I thought wasn't quite the right thing. And so it teaches you how to have those conversations without making it uncomfortable or without making it challenging. And it's much more about how do we find the right thing for what our club needs this year as Toastmasters. So that was a lot of information in about 20 minutes, maybe more than 20. And that was kind of my summary of all the things I've seen and heard about people's benefits or what they think about when they're coming into club officer roles. I'd like to open it up for whatever questions people have, or if anyone has additional ideas on what they think we should include in talking about why people would want to be a club officer.
All right, if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand, or there is a Q&A box that you can also type questions in if you don't want to ask it in person. Joanna, I thank you. That was fantastic information. I had written down just a quick note as you were going through, and this is not so much of a question, but if you are in a club where you're talking to someone about being an officer, this is a great video that you can share and run through so they get a feel for why it's important for them or what's in it for them. But once you've got your officers in place, which should be done by...
The first meeting in May is when you should have your elections for your new officers. And
right.
then they will start at the beginning of July.
Correct. And then I don't know if we can kind of talk a little bit about how to notify Toastmasters International, because we've got some clubs that I've met where they've elected officers and then didn't tell anyone.
Oh, well, we want to know about them.
Yes.
And it's helpful to ensure that TI is aware of them before the end of the Toastmasters year for two reasons. And one is simply to get the Distinguished Club point, which I would argue is the less important, but still an important reason to do it. Mm-hmm. And then the other piece is that starts the communication off, right? So as we transition from old officers to new, once you've submitted those new officers in Toastmasters International, then the communication will start flipping over to them once July 1st starts. So in Toastmasters International site, so in toastmasters.org, I'm gonna go pull up. So I went to toastmasters.org and I went to Leadership Central and I need to go.
Club Central.
Yep. So I went to Club Officer Tools, which is wrong, but in Club Central, I don't know if it'll let me. Oh yeah, it will. So I selected, I'm a member of two clubs, so I needed to select the club that I wanted to do something with. And then there's an option for club officer assignments. So for any officers, you will have the ability to go in there and do a few different tasks. I hope that people have seen this already, but they may not have. And under club officer assignment, you can update these with the future version.
All right.
Do make sure you hit save when you've done it, and it will pop up in here and it will show a screenshot of all of the current ones as well. At least the last time I did it, it will show all the current and then it will show all the future. You'll want to do it before the end of June so that it will show your current 2018, 2019 officers, and then it will show your future 2019, 2020 officers.
Yeah, and on that page, you can hit the drop down, select the member, and don't do this because I don't want to mess up your. But you can hit the drop down. I'm not
going to actually change it. Yeah.
You could select a member, and then when you click term start date, you would choose July 1st, 2019. And it won't override the current officer.
Correct.
It'll put them in as a future officer.
As long as your start dates don't overlap.
Correct.
Yep. So as long as you change these to be the next, I won't change anything.
Right. Okay. So thank you. Thank you for demonstrating that. We do have a question. Brian Parsons asked, and we'll cover it here. How do you persuade people that it would be a good idea for them to be club officers if they are somewhat reluctant to fill the role?
That's a really common question, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of what inspired tonight's topic. So I think of it in a few different ways. To me, it's really important for us to match people with what is beneficial for them. It's just like anything else. If you're selling something, you're thinking about what's in it for me. If you are the one purchasing something, you're going to think about what's in it for me. So if you're selling, you're always thinking about what's in it for them, right? So there's a couple different ways that I think about that. And one of them is knowing what that person is good at, knowing what they're interested in, or knowing something about that element that I will approach it in that manner. The second piece of it is flat out asking them, what are your goals, either in Toastmasters or getting to know them enough so you know what their goals are outside of Toastmasters, and emphasizing the part of the role that is connected to that. So if I know someone who is interested in improving how they influence people at work or improving how they influence people in other settings, whatever that might be, then I might think about, well, VP membership is one where that can be really effective, or figure out what officer role makes sense for them based on what is important. So I think there's that. I don't know that I would ever advocate making someone feel guilty. I think I would probably always steer toward the making people, sharing with them where you see their potential to be amazing, or sharing with them where you see it might help them for the future. I think that's where we otherwise develop the reputation of voluntelling people, and I don't think that's productive.
Mm-hmm. Very, very good answer. Another thing I'd like to throw out is we do record all of these webinars. Feel free to go out to YouTube and grab the video, and you can share it with them. Mm-hmm. And or you can give them instructions on how to get out and find the video.
As well as a lot of times people are worried. Sorry, Dave, were you done? I didn't mean to cut you off. A lot of times people are worried about being an officer for the first time if they're not sure what the officer role entails. And we have videos from this past fall on every single role, and where we run through essentially what the role entails, like what are they responsible for. So that can be really helpful in sharing those videos, and none of them are longer than this. So none of them are longer than 45 minutes. And the other thing that could be helpful is having either the current officer meet with that person individually, or having your current officers do kind of a run through, whether it's a speech or like a panel discussion, that using some of your meeting time to talk through, I would say March or April would be perfect timing for this, using some meeting time to talk through what does each role entail and what has been their experience about that. Like, what have they seen that has been beneficial from having the role, so people can start thinking about it.
Sure. Brian, I'm assuming that answers your question. Are there any other questions? Oh, we've got another one. Brian adds on, he says, you may want to give potential officers some estimate of the time commitment for a particular role, don't you?
For sure. I think one of the worst things you can do is to minimize or pretend that there's no commitment, or, oh, it'll be easy, you'll just figure it all out. I think the best approach is to be really clear up front about what the expectations are of the role. And again, the more you share, like the videos that we had on each role, or this video, or even just having them talk to whoever's in the role now, the more they're going to go into it knowing what to expect and be set up to be successful with it. So yeah, for sure.
All right. We have a question from Mike Overland. He says, do either of you or any of the listeners have a favorite resource for describing officer roles? I'm thinking of either a very short videos, 1 to 3 minutes, or short text. Basically something that I can put on my club website in addition to talking with them directly and some of these more detailed videos.
I'd be curious if any of our audience has anything.
If anyone's got something, why don't you raise your hand?
My piece would be, actually the officer handbook has like 1 to 3 pages on each role. It's actually pretty short. And it's accessible on the TI site. And that would probably, I mean, it would take a couple of minutes at most to read each one.
I'll tell you what, Mike, I'm not going to go searching for it right now, but I believe I have something that might help you out, and it's from the year that I was an area governor at the time. But when I was filling the area director role, we did a training, and I had a one-pager and it described in a paragraph. Now, it's not a full description of the club officer role, but if you were looking just for a quick hitter, here's what each officer role does. I will email that out following the webinar. But I have to do a little bit of searching. It's been a little while since I've been an area director. Any other? Okay. Oh, no, that wasn't a question. Any other questions? All right. Well, Joanna, I'd like to thank you for putting this together. This was a fantastic presentation, and I would say definitely this is worth watching if you've got someone who is a little bit on the fence as to whether to step into and step up to being a club officer. It is a really great it's a great personal growth opportunity, and it's a great way to step up your leadership game, and you get to make a real difference in your club. See, Michael Nelson asked a question. I'm sorry, we got this one here. It says, doesn't the Toastmaster site have a club officer handbook that all members have access to?
Heck yes, they do. Let me show you how to get there.
Do.
I've already been there today. You can search Officer Handbook or
Club Leadership Handbook on Google.
I was going to say Club Leadership, I think is what it says. And pops up.
Yep.
And you can download it, so you can save it on your hard drive. But I like having it online because then I can always grab whatever the most up-to-date copy is. And this is what I was mentioning with Mike's question is in the table of contents, it has just a few pages on each role. So it's not more than 2 to 3 pages max that of what each role does.
And then in here as well, if you were to click on the word treasurer, because you're there, it'll link you right to that page.
Yes.
And one thing to point out, it used to be TI's practice that every year they would send hard manuals to the outgoing club president for distribution to next year's team. That practice has stopped entirely, and the Club Leadership Handbook is an online resource now. So there will not be paper manuals being mailed out for the Club Leadership Handbook. So getting to know where it is, I'd bookmark it. Although Joanna demonstrated that you can do a search on the Toastmasters site, you can do that same search on Google, and it is the #1 hit. If you type in Club Leadership Handbook, you don't even have to put Toastmasters Club Leadership Handbook. Google knows what the best leadership organization is, and they'll pop up the Toastmasters Club Leadership Handbook every time. First hit. So that's our handbook, and it really is a thorough source of information. And I'd recommend that any club officer keep that handy and refer back to it.
Yep.
All right. Well, we are at the top of our program. So, Joanna, as I said, thank you for putting this together. This is fantastic information. I'd like to thank all of our participants for coming out and dedicating your time to pick up new ideas to help you and your club succeed. I think when we as leaders spend time and grow in our leadership skills, everybody wins. So this has been Toolbox Tuesday, and we'll see you next week. Have a great night, everyone.